Hello everyone and welcome to a very special episode of Brainwaves. It's the end of the year and what a year it has been, and we thought we'd take a moment to take stock of the year, look back at some of the articles and stories that we talked about earlier in the year, have a chat about them, and look forward a little bit to 2021 and what that might bring to the world of gaming. I am of course joined by regular hosts Jamie.
Hello there.
And Iain.
Hello.
But it's not just us three tonight. We are also joined by a very special guest, and we're very happy to welcome Josh Hartley of the Unlucky Frog to the Brainwaves HQ. How you doing, Josh?
Thank you very much for having us. Yes, I'm grand, thank you. I say grand, this has been an awful year.
Yeah.
Overall. But in this moment, I am content.
That's good. How are the rest of the Unlucky Frog doing these days?
Very good, yeah. Ben and Charlotte are now settled into their new place. So,
phenomenal.
So very exciting times for them. Mr. Tom Mannering as well. Funnily enough, I was just recording with him earlier this evening as well. So he's keeping well. He's keeping well. Looking forward to things going back to some sort of normality next year, although I'm probably jumping the gun here. When that's going to be exactly, I don't know.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to it with vaccines on the horizon. You know, there is some hope there that we'll actually get to sit around the table and play some games together in the not like crazy distant future. And so, talking about vaccines, of course, we can't really do any 2020 look back cast without talking about the coronavirus and how it has basically disrupted, well, literally everything. For the gaming world, the major impact there has been conventions, of course. Conventions have not been a thing this year, and we saw a slew of them cancelled at the start of the year, and we haven't seen anything really in the way of conventions apart from the virtual side of things. We've seen, Virtual Expo, Virtual sort of Gamma, Virtual... what else did we see?
Virtual Spiel, Virtual UKGE.
Yeah.
Dragon Meet was now ModCon, or was kind of in partnership with Modiphius for ModCon. To name but a few.
Albacon as well was.
Of course.
Oh yes, Albacon,
yeah,
which replaced Tabletop Scotland.
Yes.
I
feel bad I forgot about Albacon.
Me too.
Was there, Josh, you're more involved in the world of war games than any of us are. Was there any sort of attempt to sort of do virtual versions of any war game conventions at all?
No, not really. Like the thing, obviously, gaming is a huge part of all of these conventions, but particularly with the likes of like Warhammer and 40k, etc., that's very difficult to organize virtually. You can, and people have been playing these games on Tabletop Simulator. I have tried that. That for me is a painful experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a painful enough experience using it for just board games. I can't imagine for miniature games.
Yeah, exactly. It is, to caveat this, like as with using it for playing board games, it's better than not playing full stop at all.
Completely.
But, what Warhammer, Games Workshop have been doing, they have been doing online streams to sort of tease out the information that they would normally be releasing at these sort of conventions. Anyway, it's not the same though. There's not the same excitement as being in the room when that information gets released though. So it's a shame. It's a huge shame.
Yeah, I mean, we sorely missed Games Expo. I'd been down at Dragon Meet in London in the last week or so. If things have been normal, seeing friends down there that I don't really get to see otherwise. See them about once a year down at Dragon Meet. So yeah, it's a sad time to not be able to see people and see friends from far and wide. But on the sort of discussion side of this kind of thing, do you think we're going to see companies toning down the number of releases for next year, for 2021, maybe pushing more of their evergreen titles? That's titles that they sort of have in stock and they sell over and over again. Things like Catan would be a good example of an evergreen title. Or do you think we'll still see like big, huge new releases next year? What do you think, chaps?
I think next year is full steam ahead.
Yeah.
Yep. It's time for FOMO. It's time for conventions. It's time for massive Kickstarters. Save the
backlog
companies.
is going to cause a massive swell, and it's going to be a tidal wave.
Yep.
What I would hope and I know I'm being slightly flippant, but I'd hope that we see less of to none is coronavirus-themed games that are akin to exploding kittens, except instead of drawing an exploding
There's
kitten,
been so
drawing
many
a
of those on
coronavirus card.
Kickstarter. Yeah. Just don't. If you think you've got a good idea for a coronavirus board game, just stop.
Matt Leacock would like to tap you on the shoulder and go, "Pandemic, guys. Sorry."
Yeah. If there, I mean, if there's ever like when you're asking yourself, is this too soon? Like, if you're still in the event, it is 100% too soon.
Yeah.
So, like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Is that thing still literally happening? It's too soon. Yeah. Yeah,
Grey's
absolutely.
Anatomy are refilming the final season to include coronavirus, in case anyone is wondering.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
That's so. The thing is, obvious. A moment, a point in their defense, right? It is a medical show. It would kind of be weird if they didn't talk about coronavirus like at all. But at the same time, is that really in good taste? I don't know.
Yeah.
I saw. I think it was. Might have been Joel Schumacher produced, not directed, but a film that was coming out. I think it was on streaming or something like that, or it was meant to be at a festival. But it was basically like the idea was, it's day 3000 of the lockdown.
Oh, is that a Michael
basically
Bay
far future of like this event, and it's like, guys, that is really way too soon. Please stop.
I was going to say, this is obviously Joel Schumacher before he died.
Maybe I'm getting the name wrong there. I can't remember. It was a director I recognised, but I can't remember.
Michael Bay?
Nah. I'll look it up.
Michael Bay's
I'll look it up.
Another rubbish director. It could be him.
Yeah.
Welcome to Film Waves.
Yeah.
We are. This is the 2020 look back on films, and us just slagging film. We'll get back to games later, but now let's do some film slagging.
Let me tell you about my opinions about what Christopher Nolan said recently. Anyway, moving on. One thing I'd like to touch on a little bit actually for like conventions next year, especially in the UK, since we're talking about them, Brexit is obviously going to be a thing there.
Yes.
With companies like visas or for people coming over, product getting into the country. I was talking about this on Twitter recently that I think it's going to be much harder for UK reviewers to get games, especially from the States and from European companies. It's just going to be harder. Prices have gone up posting to the UK. There's new VAT considerations. All sorts of things happening there. What do you guys think will be the effect of Brexit on conventions once they get up and running? And we're still talking about sort of probably last quarter next year before conventions properly get back to going.
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. I think if coronavirus hadn't happened, I would have thought that within the first quarter of next year, the convention scene would have still been very much disrupted as a consequence of that, particularly like some of the larger ones that do have some of a draw from the continent. I would like to think that some of the sort of logistical kinks might have been worked out by the time that we're actually having conventions. That being said, it is inevitably going to cost companies from the European Union more to now attend any conventions within the UK. And in particular, the one that comes to mind in particular for me is UK Games Expo. So
yeah, that's the one I've got in mind as well.
Yeah, so you have to be wondering, the leadership teams of all these various companies, big and small, they're all going to be asking themselves, is it worth our while? Like, we've got Essen, we've got like dozens of other conventions throughout Europe. Do we need to attend UK Games Expo? It is currently the third biggest in the world. Well, time will tell. Time will tell as to how that's impacted. But that's definitely going to be a conversation that people are going to be having about whether they want to attend or not.
Yep. I think a lot of companies are going to say, you know what, UK Games Expo is the one expo we're going to focus on in the UK and go to. I think a lot of the smaller expos might be hit really harshly by international guests just not turning up. That's
a good point. Yeah, as they go, well, it costs more to go to UK conventions, so we'll go to the big one.
Yep.
And we'll not go to like Dragon Meet or Aircon or
exactly
any of the smaller ones. Yeah, it'd be a real shame there. But yet another consequence of our excellent decisions.
I did see this. I don't know if someone pulled this out of their backside, But I did see someone tweet that Games Workshop is worth 4 times the amount of the UK fishing industry. And then they hope that...
We saw that as well, and we've been trying to quantify it. It's really interesting.
I really want to know. I want to know how many more times the guys who make toy soldiers is worth than the hill that Boris Johnson is currently dying on.
Or the arts and entertainment industry is massively bigger than fishing.
Yeah.
Massively bigger. I think like fishing in the UK is something like 0.4 billion. It's like a tiny slice of a very... Yeah, it's not tiny.
It's not even... So 0.4 billion. It's not even broke a billion.
I think that's correct. I think I saw that statistic in The Guardian the other day. That I might be wrong, and I will check that. But it is very, very small piece of our GDP pie. And arts and entertainment and things like computer game industry, for instance, are bigger. Yeah. In fact, there are fewer people. This is completely off topic, but we'll go for it. There are fewer people working in fishing than were working in Debenhams.
That's insane. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got all of this attention because it was an election pledge. So there we go.
Basically.
Politics, yay!
Talking about politics.
Just to add, in 2019, the fishing industry accounted for 0.12% of the UK's GDP.
There we go.
Anyway, talking about politics, we're going to be touching on all the very light topics on this cast, obviously. Of course, towards the start of the year, there were tragic events in America, and the Black Lives Matter movement came to the attention of everyone worldwide. And as a consequence of a lot of that movement, representation and racism in the tabletop games industry, and amongst other fandoms and geekdoms as well.
Indeed, almost all levels of society.
All levels of society, yes, indeed. It came to the fore. We reported on various consequences of this. Things like GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association, cancelled Origins Online as guests walked out over GAMA's silence on the matter. Wizards moved to ban racist Magic cards. They also put a statement out on diversity and representation in D&D. Someone called Ryan Black left, who was a writer for D&D, and they burned the bridges on the way out with a statement that said they had very little support inside, work had been stolen, and their statement actually got a lot of support from outside and actually inside Wizards, including Greg Tito, Wizards Senior Communication Manager. We've also seen the representation side of D&D come to fore with people like Sarah Thompson putting out the Combat Wheelchair and new rules regarding race and racial bonuses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that came out fairly recently. Mm-hmm. Other companies also sort of imploded a little bit around about this time. We saw a lot of harassment accusations from inside Cards Against Humanity, and the head of the company, Max Temkin, was ousted because of that. Lots of companies put out statements saying they stood with the Black Lives Matter movement, including ourselves. And so one thing I'd like to ask is, do we think that a lot of those companies, including us, will live up to those promises? We basically said that we'd help raise up the profile of smaller designers, smaller publishers, and try and get as many diverse voices as possible in things like Meeting of Minds or interviews on the site. And I've been trying to get in touch with more female creators, certainly, over the course of the year. And I need to find more people from diverse backgrounds as well. So I haven't managed that yet, but I am still working towards that. With the bigger companies, do we think that they're going to carry these pledges into 2021 and actually do something about them, or is it just lip service? Silence.
Yeah. I don't doubt that these pledges are, for the most part, made with the best of intentions. But it's very easy for this sort of stuff to fall by the wayside once the microscope is no longer there. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, trying to push for more diversity in tabletop gaming, in geekdom, in the rest of life is not a new thing at all. No. And this is not the first time that companies have made pledges to do better and to be better. But when, like I say, when the attention is not on that, it's very easy to forget. So my gut feeling is kind of. I think It would not surprise me if, and this may sound cynical, but it would not surprise me if a lot of this has been forgotten about by the time that we've come to this time next year, unfortunately.
Yeah, Wizards put out a statement recently saying it's going to take them years to change a lot of the stuff that's sort of entrenched in D&D with the sort of racial stuff and things like that.
What do you guys think is the right solution to addressing this? Because like the elephant in the room is that when I go to gaming conventions or gaming stores or you know, whatever, any public place to play one of these games, sat around the table at me is overwhelmingly like white middle class men. So like, is it companies' responsibilities to change that from the top down, or is it us to try and change it from the bottom up? Or what I think is the actual solution is a mix of the two.
I was going to say, is it a bit of a weasel out to say a mix of the two and hope, and with the best, you know, most optimistic will in the world, trying to meet in the middle?
Yeah, it's a real catch-22 that. With, like, for instance, a game Iain and I both love, Netrunner, had a huge sort of had a very diverse pool of art in its game, and as such attracted a very diverse pool of players. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there where, yes, you need companies to sort of put out diverse art and have diverse representation in the games, because that attracts a more diverse clientele to the games. It attracts a more diverse group of gamers to the games. But also you need some kind of pressure from communities to make that happen as well, I think. You need people to say, we want this. Otherwise, companies aren't going to do it, because in the end, companies are out to make money. And if they think there's nothing in it for them, even with the best will in the world, they're not going to do that thing. So I think you're right, Josh. I think it's a bit of both. I'd like to see more companies being a bit more forthright. Like, Wizards have a lot of easy options, I think. Like, they say like it's going to take years to do this, but there's people literally champing at the bit to have this kind of thing in D&D, for instance. And they could just hire those people.
Yeah, and it's not only that. I mean, that like one of their big properties, obviously, is Magic the Gathering. That is an art-based game. Like on all of these cards is a piece of art, and they have over the years got better at representation within those cards and within the stories surrounding those cards as well. More of that, please. And certainly, going back to the point on the racist cards that got banned earlier this year, they have come a long way. Like those, we've all seen those cards. We're firmly in yikes territory when we're looking at the art for those. One thing I will say, and because there's probably a few people who are wondering, well, why on earth did they not ban them previously? To my knowledge, literally no one was playing with those cards. They were not competitive on any level whatsoever. I think the only one I had heard, one of the cards banned was Crusade, which I think I'd heard of someone using it in like a knight-themed like commander deck, which I can see why it's in there. So, when you look at the art of all of these cards, it's like, wow, we've come a long way since the 90s.
One little aside, we're going to be talking about a lot of topics that we've covered earlier in the year. Of course, we'll put links to all this stuff in the show notes so everyone can go and listen back to old casts and read old articles and that kind of thing as well.
Because to be fair, we have covered a lot about, for example, Wizards of the Coast and various things. So there's going to be a lot of links to that. Cards Against Humanity has cropped up again and again, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of companies this year that have taken a long, hard look at themselves. What do you think, Iain?
I reckon it's really, really important that these companies make these statements on Black Lives Matter and make safe spaces and explicitly chase out racists.
Yeah.
Because it's not that the industry doesn't have diversity, it's that diversity isn't represented in the open spaces where they can be targets. It's that these people don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's because they're not represented high up in the companies, and it's because these companies are not saying, hey, we don't pander to racists. What we need is companies explicitly to say, if you're racist, you are not welcome. And they need to say that regularly as well, because it's all well and good getting, say, Arch Warhammer chased out of Games Workshop, but there's still the undertones of creepy racism in a lot of the fan base, and that needs repeated casting out explicitly.
I think that's fair. I mean, especially within Games Workshop, a lot of the sort of like a lot of the original art and that kind of thing has a sort of slightly, how do I put this politely?
40k itself was a satirical.
There's xenophobia is a thing in 40k, but in a sort of like sly nudge nudge wink wink over the top kind of way, and it's meant to be over the top and silly.
Some of it was nudge nudge wink wink. Some of it was just look at this. This is absolutely ridiculous. Now we can get away with this because we all know this is being stupid, right? Why guys? What are you doing?
No, this is the satire paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
It's anytime you try and satirize something, you are at risk of actually making it look kind of cool. Like American History X, for an example. Like,
that's a good example.
It's clearly in that movie, the protagonist's a bad guy for believing what he believes in, but at the same time, white supremacists love that film. So it's a double-edged sword satire. That's, for me, clearly that is the intent of the Warhammer 40k universe. If you were there at home thinking, "Oh, the Imperium Man sounds like a cool place to be," it's not. Very much not.
No.
But again, like, some people are just tone deaf, and they think Space Marines are really heroes. So,
Yeah. I mean, I remember, like, I've got one of the early 40k rulebooks where it describes like what a Space Marine actually is, and they're monsters.
Yes.
Oh, they
are
have,
genetically
like,
engineered monsters.
Like multiple livers.
They can eat the brains of their opponents to gain knowledge and stuff like that. Just they're monsters.
They're
absolute monsters.
And they have no problem with like just exterminating an entire planet just because there's a little bit of chaos there.
Only a little bit. But sometimes only a little bit's enough. But he who fights monsters must take care unless he himself becomes a monster. I realise I butchered that Nietzsche quote, but never mind.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Talking about taking things out of context. Nietzsche, old boy. Oh, shame.
Yeah,
what are we talking about again?
Well, let's move on to Wizards a little bit. We mentioned Wizards a couple of times in that Black Lives Matter section there, and Wizards of the Coast has had a generally bad year PR-wise. They've had problems with a couple of artists. Noah Bradley was fired for admitting sexual harassment. Therese Nielsen was fired for liking racist and anti-Semitic tweets. We'll come back to this again, but the representation, their promised diversity in the product, did they really deliver that in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything? Like we've been saying, they've said that's going to take years to really filter down into the community. And should it? Recent lawsuits with Gale Force 9 and Dragonlance writers as well. And there's been a little bit of speculation over Wizards potentially being sold.
Now, you say that speculation, Ian. I'd like to reiterate, one site, one story.
Wild speculation.
Yeah, it is wild.
We love it, though.
Grandiose. Yes.
There's nothing wrong with a bit of wild speculation, and this year has been a wild year for companies being bought and sold. Mm-hmm. So what do we think Wizards will get up to in 2021? Looking forward to 2021, what do we think Wizards will do to like address these problems internally, get themselves sort of back on an even keel PR-wise? I mean, they're still the biggest RPG company in the world. Dungeons & Dragons is still massively popular. Do they need to do anything?
I think they're going to be prepared for a huge PR bandwagon when the the Forgotten Realms set of Magic the Gathering comes out. I think they're gonna really.
Oh, I'd forgotten that was coming.
They're gonna push that real hard and hope that people forget about all of this stuff.
Hey, about that racism inside our company. Look, shiny cards.
For the audience and specific members of the cast who may not know what Forgotten Realms actually is, would you mind a short explanation? No.
The fictional setting, or the de facto fictional setting of Dungeons and Dragons. It is not the only one by any stretch, but it is definitely the one that Wizards uses most often when they're designing that game.
I believe it first came into prominence in 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s.
Yeah.
And from pretty much 3rd or 3.5 edition, it became kind of the the main setting, that everything that went on pretty much happened in
a lot
the
of
Forgotten Realms.
A lot of the Dungeons and Dragons based video games as well are set in that setting as well. I'm thinking like Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, that sort of stuff. It's
kind of you're very generic. Generic because it's Dungeons and Dragons. Very traditional high fantasy place. I would really like to describe more, but it's a generic high fantasy place that's basically mostly some kind of the West, but there's also supplements for the east of the world, and depending on what edition it is, also for going into space.
Nice. So it's a bit like, you could say it's a Terranoth ripoff, I guess.
I mean, we could say it's a Middle Earth ripoff, but like when we're in this genre, everything's a Middle Earth ripoff. So
the shadow of Tolkien looms large over everything in this hobby.
Well, one thing we will see in 2021 is a new edition of the One Ring RPG from its new owners.
Cubicle 7
coming out.
Oh, nice.
Nope.
Sorry, it's not.
No. I can't remember who the new owners are. Cubicle 7 used to own it, but don't anymore.
Then ignore what I said then.
For context, I'd just like to say Terranoth is the land that Fantasy Flight Games uses for their...
for Genesis.
Stuff.
For like battle lore and that tabletop battle miniatures game they had that didn't do very well.
And I think
Kings
that's
of
the
War,
full
I'm still
extent
seeing
of what I know
boxes
about
of it on sale for like £5.
Yeah, I mean, it is the most... It's the most generic fantasy saying ever.
it's a shame because the minis aren't bad. I mean, if you're a budding GM and you want to get some like generic skeletons and orcs, like you could do a lot worse than picking up some of those boxes.
But it is actually an intellectual property that Fantasy Flight own, as opposed to all the ones they don't own anymore.
Yeah.
More on that later.
Tease more on that later.
I spent a good 40 minutes of my life looking at the games in static with the big reduced to like £5 sticker on them.
Yep.
And going, is it worth it? Josh, you've played a bit more Pathfinder than any of us. What's sort of Paizo been up to this year? And have they responded in any way to sort of Wizards' troubles?
Not really. They definitely haven't. I don't feel like they've capitalized on it particularly well. That being said, they've had a bit of a rough couple of years since they've launched second edition Pathfinder anyway. Mm-hmm. The player base did not take to it half as well as they were certainly hoping. And I think they've kind of been struggling with that, trying to get... And I understand why they needed to do a second edition. Pathfinder had like countless expansions written for it. It had become like bloated beyond belief, even worse than any sort of state that 3.5 had got. But that being said, I think one of the big mistakes they did was just not making it possible for people to transfer their existing characters over, and people get really invested in them. So I think that reason and many others to do with the mechanics of the game, I think they've still been kind of struggling with that, to be honest.
Yeah, you still see countless D&D streams, and that's why D&D's become so popular. All that live streaming, all that sort of popularity through places like Critical Role. But I just don't see the same kind of support for Pathfinder at all.
No, yeah. I would say I would love to get the official stats on this. I would wager about 10 years ago, Pathfinder might have been more played than D&D 4th edition.
I would have almost certainly.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think, without a doubt, D&D 5th edition is the most played RPG, pen and paper RPG in the world right now. I would wager Call of Cthulhu is now second, and has leapfrogged Pathfinder in that regard.
I can't back this up right now because I can't find where I saw it, but I did see, I think it was from Roll20, that was, at least a slice, and it was what percentage of games were played this year were...
Yeah, we've covered that a couple of times over the year.
Yeah, the majority, I think the main one was Dungeons & Dragons, obviously, and then, I can't remember what order it was, but I think it was Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, Pathfinder was in there. I can't remember which edition, unfortunately. And then, I think it was top 10, and number 10 was Honey Heist by Grant Howitt.
Nice.
Yes. As a little thing, if anyone is interested in more of Grant Howitt's RPGs, join his Patreon, and he has been doing a one-page RPG a month, pretty much. And the most recent one is called Stone the Crows, which is a Guy Ritchie film about stealing the crown jewels from the Tower of London, except you're all birds.
I love it. Sign me up.
Absolutely love it. Yep.
This podcast is not sponsored by Roanoke and Decker, though we'd be happy to do so.
So we have the actual figures from Roll20 here. D&D was 47%, Call of Cthulhu 15%, Uncategorized, that wonderful RPG we all love, 14%, Pathfinder in at 5%.
Wow, that's quite a big drop between. Wow. I mean, a huge drop between D&D and the rest of the pack, right? But like from Call of Cthulhu to Pathfinder, I thought it would be a bit closer than that.
Yeah, you should all be playing Blades in the Dark anyway.
This is the report for 2019.
Yeah.
So who knows?
I'm sure we'll see some. I'm sure we'll be covering some end of year reports in the first sort of few months of next year on the cast. We'll see exactly what's come out of that. Anyway, moving on to slightly lighter fare. One thing we wanted to mention, because we covered it 2 or 3 times over the course of the year, was Kickstarter unionization efforts. If you're not familiar with Kickstarter, it's a crowdfunding platform where a lot of board game and RPG projects get funded. You pledge to a particular project, and if it reaches its funding goal, the production goes ahead, and eventually somewhere down the line you get a product, or that's how it's meant to go. Doesn't always happen quite that smoothly. It was back in episode 42 when we first reported on Kickstarter's unionization efforts, and the union did eventually get formed, helping them to negotiate settlement for staff that were laid off early in the pandemic. And this is a pretty historic moment for unionization in the States, because it's the first really big tech company, and apart from whatever else Kickstarter does, it is a tech company to unionize in the States. So this is a little off topic for us, but it's still an important thing to talk about, I think, and it's worth looking back at. Do you think we're going to see more tech companies unionize? There's always chat about like Amazon workers unionizing, that kind of thing. And do you think one of the things I'd like to talk about is, do you think this will lead to better conditions for people like volunteers at board game conventions? Because it's always a little bit of a bone of contention around conventions, is that a lot of the staff, in air quotes, I know I'm doing that on the podcast,
great radio, Ian. Great radio, Ian.
Yeah,
Thank
totally
you.
Great radio. I'm a professional. Definitely not been doing this for 2 years.
I also realize it's not radio. I just have a habit of hearing people go, "Great radio."
Yeah. So do we think that'll lead to, like, efforts to unionize things like that will lead to companies looking at their own staff, like maybe paying volunteers rather than just assume people do it for free? What do you think that the sort of upshot of Kickstarter unionizing is going to be?
I had such high hopes for this, and to be frank, let's look at CD Projekt Red, whose staff have been in crunch indefinitely and are going to continue to be in indefinite crunch for the future. And
despite them saying they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Despite the CEO saying it's all fine, we're not really in crunch.
For those not familiar with it, the term crunch is something that tends to occur in computer game companies, and it refers to a period of very, very intense working where staff are effectively not exactly forced, but pretty close to effectively live in the office and finish the product before release. It tends to happen in the run-up to releases of big computer games a lot, and it's a massive bone of contention in sort of working standards in the computer game industry. Sorry, Ian, on you go.
I had extremely high hopes that the game dev world would unionize, because it actually looked like there was a very solid push, especially with Blizzard unionizing in France, for example. And
oh yes, I'd forgotten that happened.
Yeah, and yet we look at it now, and you can see the CD Projekt Red devs in absolute crunch, and clearly due to the buggy nature of Cyberpunk 2077, they're going to continue to be. And yet the game has sold incredibly well. The consumer pressure just does not exist.
What was it, 8 million pre-orders?
There was an interesting article I read recently that was an interview with a company called Supergiant Games, who I'm a massive fan of. They have made the recent game Hades, computer game Hades, roguelike game, sort of Greek mythology tones to it.
Game of the year.
Really great game, fantastic game. But they've had basically the same staff since forming. The core sort of 7 people or so that made the company originally are still there, They've brought on all others, obviously, as they've grown, but they don't believe in crunch. They have family time. They turn off emails at the weekend. They just have a completely different attitude to this stuff. They manage projects properly. They work to timelines, and they put out products that are fantastic and beloved and doing huge numbers for the size of studio they are.
Yep.
It doesn't. Basically, I'm saying it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah, crunch is not necessary.
The thing is, this definitely isn't a problem that's unique to the video game industry or like gaming industry in general. Like, this happens in a lot of different industries across the world. This sort of culture of get the product done, get it to the deadline. I don't like. You shouldn't care that you're not seeing your family or resting or sleeping or whatever.
Suffering for your art.
Yeah, and
if only it was our.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say, speak for yourself. I work in banking, so what I do think and makes me a little bit more optimistic is that there is an increasing pressure on companies to change this culture. I've seen it in my own workplace where they are. The words they're saying is like to not encourage people to like work more than they're willing to, and have a good, healthy work-life balance. Sometimes the actions don't quite match the words, but at least the words are there. And I think as time marches on, I hope this will become a thing that will become a thing of the past. I just don't know when we're going to reach that point.
I think one of the things the coronavirus has done is have a lot of people take stock of like their work-life balance and realize like, oh, I can work from home on this particular thing. Like I remember reading an article like someone saying like, oh, people working at home this winter will have bigger fuel bills, and I was thinking like, yeah, but they'll be spending like £1,000 less that month commuting to work, so. Swings and roundabouts,
As an aside, I absolutely love working from home, and I'm definitely plan to do this for as long as I can get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine like a lot of companies will be taking stock of like, do we really need this gigantically expensive office space? Oh, look, we don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to our lords and masters, Asmodee. Asmodee, of course, own pretty much, well... Everything. They own a lot of the board gaming world. But this year they've been buying and shedding companies. So Asmodee went on a big buying spree over the last couple of years, and this year they have been shedding a couple of those companies as well. Like Plaid Hat was the first to go towards the start of the year. They went back to being Plaid Hat, not under Asmodee. They did shed Dead of Winter as they went, which is their biggest property. Asmodee basically took that within the parent company. And more recently, Fantasy Flight has been going under a massive rearrangement over the last year. So recently, the Star Wars miniatures games, all of them, so that's X-Wing, Legion, and Armada, all moved to Atomic Mass Games, which is an Asmodee-owned studio. They're best known for Crisis Protocol, which is the Marvel Marvel superheroes miniatures game that they now own Star Wars. The RPGs early in the year were moved to a company called Edge Entertainment. That's another Asmodee company, surprise, surprise. And they've been losing jobs and losing other games, Fantasy Flight, and now they're just down to basically, well, as we said, Terranoth games, Arkham Horror, the sort of Arkham Horror files, that kind of stuff.
Of course, they've got more than you think. I mean, there is things.
Twilight Imperium as well. Yeah,
I was looking at this the other day actually with Iain. They still have things. Obviously, they have Lord of the Rings, they have the Arkham files, they have Descent, which remember is coming very soon.
Oh yeah, new edition of Descent, yeah.
Yes. They still hold the Android license, so games like New Angeles.
Do something with the Android, and I will buy literally anything with the Android.
You hear that?
License.
You hear that? He'll buy literally anything. Literally.
You could make Netrunner cereal, and I would buy it.
Android dating simulator coming in 2021.
We'll know if Iain's hooked up to that if he gets some cyberpunk in his head.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, will we see Asmodee? Do you think we'll see Asmodee continue to buy companies up in 2021? Are they done? They seem to be splitting things up into individual studios. So Fantasy Flight's obviously going to be their board game, card game studio. Edge will be their RPG studio, and Atomic Mass is going to be their miniature studio. That's quite a smart way to run things, I guess, because it means they have specialized knowledge in each of those particular companies. But do you think we'll see them scoop up anyone else? Will they buy Games Workshop?
They
Rampant speculation.
Games Workshop is worth too much. I mean...
Yeah,
but also
I would actually be interested to know the relevant worth of Games Workshop to Asmodee, because I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah. What I think it is, it's interesting to see that they are, compartmentalizing them so they can be more specialized. But I think that if you pardon, the use of word, because the only thing I can think of, the cross disciplines of, board games working together with card games, working together with role playing games, working together with miniatures games, and bits and pieces from each of them. You can take and learn from each of those different sides, and maybe improve your game a little bit. So I think in some ways, I think it's sad that they are breaking them apart and kind of separating them, just because, you can learn get some really cool ideas from, say, a miniatures game and put that into your card game. Don't ask me what they are. I'm saying it's an entire hypothetical.
Bit of cross-pollination between ideas. Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. And
the thing that struck me with this is why? I mean, Fantasy Flight have been doing these games for quite a while now. I've played a fair few of them, and they're all decent products. Either decent at a base level as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
They didn't put anything out that was just frankly dysfunctional. So. And some of the games Fantasy Flight have put out have been fantastic.
Oh, completely.
Civilization New Dawn. Buy it.
Yeah, I don't really get it. If the whole old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, then why are we fixing something that's not broke?
I mean, you could rampant speculation time again. It is the sort of move that a company might make before they sell off. Or a company goes back, like Plaid Hat did, leaving Asmodee. Basically, the big properties have been moved to the parent company now. You could see Fantasy Flight being sold off, perhaps.
It's interesting that all they seem to is Star Wars the only specific IP that they've removed and put with one company.
Well, the RPGs all shifted to Edge as well. So the Star Wars RPG, Legend of the Five Rings, all their RPG are moved to Edge as well.
Right.
So they're basically left with board games and card games. And when we talked about this on the cast, we thought, well, what might happen is you'll see Fantasy Flight become basically the sort of franchise board game and card game arm of Asmodee. So if they get a new franchise, like Fantasy Flight are about to put out a new X-Men dice game thing. I can't remember what it's called. But that kind of thing, sort of franchise, Marvel Champions, all that kind of thing. That will be what Fantasy Flight is focused on for Asmodee, is like franchised board and card games from big film franchises, book franchises, etc. But that is rampant speculation.
I know Asmodee are huge. I don't know if Ian's Iain, were you getting the sort of figures for how much Games Workshop?
They were both valued $1 and a bit billion in 2018. I know that Games Workshop's currently valued at 3.5 or something ridiculous.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Games GW over the last couple of years has gone absolute gangbusters.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's a drastic overvaluation. But
yes, I would agree.
Then again, Asmodee's probably done the same. It's difficult to find out.
I mean, the whole hobby sector has been growing massively in the last 5-10 years.
Yep.
It's mental though that we live in a world where GW is worth more than Marks and Spencers.
I love all the jokes on Twitter that is that's the price of 6 Space Marines. No wonder they're worth more.
Or 3 Custodes.
I can't wait for the Bank of England to adopt the Space Marine standard.
Yep. The Nuln oil.
Or just to flag the Imperium flying above the Treasury.
Not a drastic differentiation from British current policies or
Hoyo.
colonial history.
Oh, let's steer away from that particular landmine right now.
Satire, remember? Satire.
Yeah, sorry. Magog Thraka is, of course, an orc and not the previous leader of the Tory party.
Definitely not. Anyway, gents, we've been talking for a little while now. What I'd like to do is get a few thoughts from each of you on your predictions for 2021 for the gaming industry in general. Go wild. What do you think is going to happen in 2021 for the gaming industry? What do you think we're going to see out of conventions, releases, companies, anything? Go for it. Make your predictions, and we'll see if they're right at the end of 2021.
What we should do is dig up our predictions from the first cast of this year.
Oh, I said there'd be more asymmetric games, and I realised it would be asymmetric. It's called different time zones and learning how to use your own interface. Joking aside, I think there's going to be some changes, maybe small, but I think meaningful changes. Things like Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia. I think there's going to be more push to use them for not. I don't know about demoing games. Maybe demoing games. I mean, I didn't see any of or experience any of the demoing going on at any of the virtual conventions, but I know that those two were very heavily involved as leading the demos. But I think that option to get your game, even if it's being kickstarted, we're seeing more games going, you can play this playable prototype on one of these platforms. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yep.
Iain, you got any thoughts on 2021?
On the convention front, I think the time of conventions being able to put out a lackluster digital front is over. I think if you don't have a decent digital front where people can browse your convention, get demos, get live demos, get product information, you're dead in the water. That's it. We had 1 year.
Do you think we'll see digital offerings alongside the physical conventions?
I do, actually. Yeah, I think that's going to be a much bigger part of conventions now. Yeah, on a different and hopeful note, I think there's going to be a big push for sustainability. As currently, there's tons of people saying we would like some sustainability in the industry, and some companies are doing it really well, but not actually announcing it, and some companies are doing nothing. And I think
Fantasy Flight laughs in destroyed rainforests.
Just showers you with plastic miniatures.
This rainforest printed one copy of Twilight Imperium 4th edition.
Yeah, I think that's
a whole dinosaur made all the minis. I won't tell you which one. Why don't you guess?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's going to be a moderate to medium focus this coming year. And if I have anything to do with it, I'm going to push it as hard as I can.
Will you have anything to do with it, Iain?
Maybe.
Gauntlet thrown.
Yeah.
Not necessarily down. Just in the general direction.
Iain might be starting up a little sustainability company, but I'm sure we'll mention that at some other point in the cast. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. For yourself, Josh, got any predictions 2021? Anything you think we'll see out of Games Workshop or wherever else you're into?
I mean, Games Workshop-wise, it's difficult for me to see the ship going drastically wrong for them. They just need to keep doing the thing that they're doing, and they're going to continue to do pretty well. They would need to make an absolute arse of the next year for things to go really sour for them. Another one of my predictions is another digital one, and possibly a bit of a cop-out, because I think this is just more of a continuing trend of tabletop games integrating tech, be it through mobile phone apps, be it through programs on a computer. I think we're going to start to see more and more and more of that, particularly as I'm sure that, not to sound like Debbie Downer here, but it's going to be in the back of people's minds. This whole pandemic thing might happen again at some point in the future. So let's maybe create products that are better suited for that as well.
Maybe see more digital adaptions of board games, that kind of thing as well, like we've seen with Root recently, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons already on my entire Steam library is actually pretty much just board game adaptations. But again, I think we're going to see more of that as well, and see hopefully some of the smaller companies put in some effort into making digital versions. It's not easy and it's not cheap, so I do understand why they might not. Convention-wise, I saw last week that UK Games Expo announced provisional dates in early June. Again, I think that is being very optimistic.
I'd agree there.
Vaccines did go live in Edinburgh this week, so
this is
maybe?
and this is true. This is true. The whole logistical challenge of getting vaccines out to everyone, and then it's a case of, okay, we're all vaccinated. We now need to wait for case numbers to actually fall.
Yep.
And with it being a logistical problem, we all know how excellent the Westminster government is at logistical problems right now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they've got it all under control.
I'm sure there's no obstacles that's going to happen between now and UK Games Expo as well.
So we've had some talk about predictions for next year. I'd like to take just a moment and go, Josh. I think listeners have probably had enough of listening to me, Ian, and Iain. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit. How have you found your year in gaming? How you found this year in gaming for you? Has there been any games that you've played, more you've really enjoyed, or kind of any notable kind of gaming moments from your year that is 2020?
My year gaming-wise has been dominated by traditional pen and paper RPGs. I've been playing them so much more than I normally would. And quite simply, they're kind of well suited for distance play, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't even need something like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds to make it work. If you all trust everyone to be honest about their dice rolls, all you need to do really is just call everyone. But we have that software now, which enables it a lot. Is it as good as playing in person? No, nothing will be. Frankly, but it, as I said earlier, better than not playing at all. So that's something that's the thing I've been playing the most. I have been pretty burnt out on Magic the Gathering over the last year. I've just been finding it very difficult to get excited about it. And again, I linked in with the pandemic. I think the reason is that the thing I value most about that game is the social aspect. It's the going into a store, seeing people, playing face-to-face. And obviously, there's digital adaptations of Magic the Gathering, and lots of people play them. For me, it's just not the same. And there have been problems with the game design of Magic the Gathering over the last year as well, which has not helped.
I really worry about Magic based on... I've seen Keyforge tournaments where people have said, hey, pay £7 and this store will open a Keyforge deck for you, and then you can play it online using that specific deck. And I just think, why didn't Wizards do something like that? Like they are the major support for friendly local gaming stores, and they just burned them.
They trying to, and it's something they should have done. Literally 20 years ago, they should have had a means of getting your physical cards into a digital space. Because their current solution is that you're just paying for both.
Yep.
Which, in reality, very few people actually do. People either play majority online or majority in person.
Yeah, it's the same with their Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Like, the online stuff is really good, but you have to, buy the supplements again within D&D Online, which
is mad, right? Sure, how much effort would it be to have a unique code in the back of whatever hardback supplement you buy?
Yeah,
and people pay good money for that. What do they cost?
30, 40 quid?
Pounds?
Yeah, they're not cheap. Yeah.
Especially for Dungeons and Dragons, when you need, at the very least, the player's handbook, the DM's guide, and the monster manual if you're going to at least DM it. So that is, you're looking at £90 to £120.
Yeah. I like this question on unique gaming moments. It's a good one for myself. It's been RPGs as well. I've been playing a lot with Gaz from the Smart Party and a few friends online. And the major one I've been playing this year is a game called Agon, which is John Harper's new game about Greek heroes and tragedies, and it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic game.
I know you sing the praises of John Harper to the rafters.
John Harper is my favorite RPG designer. He designed Blazes in the Dark as well, which everyone knows I love. But yeah, Agon's format is basically every week is a new island that your heroes turn up at, and there's a problem.
Oh, that's
and your heroes
cool.
your heroes can solve it.
Week.
Yeah, basically, it's literally Island of the Week, and by the end of it, you have solved the problems to a greater or often much, much lesser extent. But you sail away regardless, leaving destruction or not in your wake. It's fantastic. I really, really recommend Gone. It's fantastic.
So, Josh, what out of interest is what RPGs have you been playing? Has there been any that have been like not just one? Is there any that's been like a real highlight for you?
I'd like to hear about this miscellaneous that Roll20 suggests was their top 3.
Yes, I know.
I'm trying to think if any. I'm trying to think if any of the ones that I've played would fall into the miscellaneous. I'll tell you this. Tom Mannering, who is on The Unlucky Frog quite often, he did as a birthday surprise for me, as a bit of an acknowledgement of a running joke that I make with him, actually ran a one-shot of a DuckTales RPG.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Which was... I had more fun than a 34-year-old man should have. Incidentally, if anyone out there has Disney Plus, watch the new DuckTales cartoon. It is much better than it has any right to be. So that's
RPG.
That's pretty cool.
That's contributed to that miscellaneous. The main ones for me, we've been playing the Star Wars RPG by Fantasy Flight, which is now no longer in production, unfortunately. Yes. But Tom managed to snatch up the rule books before they all went.
What's the conflict mechanism, resolution mechanism in that? It sounded really interesting.
It's kind of Genesis-y, isn't it? Or pre-Genesis system?
So is this the obligation?
You roll some dice, and I think something
the weird dice.
Oh, right, the actual dice. Yeah, so basically you have a dice pool. You will have a certain number of dice that weigh in your favour versus a number of dice that weigh against you. Be that if it's like an opposed test against an actual character, or it just depending on how difficult the task at hand is. You roll dice, and certain symbols will cancel each other out. So you just count up the number of successes against the number of failures. You also have triumphs and it's not treacheries. That's the thing I want to say, but it's not. Triumphs and despairs as well, which sort of give you a bit of a narrative, like points in narrative to sort of say how you do this thing in a really fancy way. What I like about the system is it actually gives players a bit of narrative control as well. And I suppose like you could apply it to almost any RPG, but it's more explicit in Star Wars. It is, okay, you've rolled two triumph along with that, right? How does that factor into how do you do the thing that you're doing to reflect that sort of flair to it, which is nice. It's kind of nice as a player to have a bit of control over that. The one thing I will say is because it's custom dice, it is very annoying because you have to go, if you're playing in person, you have to go and buy actual dice. Like, you can't just use, you can use the polyhedrals that you already have. There's someone's done a chart to go, okay, 1 means this, 2 means that. That adds a huge headache into figuring things out.
Yeah, it's not worth the mental load for that.
Yeah. I will say I've played this exclusively on Roll20, which does all the working out for you. I haven't tried yet playing this in person with dice, so I don't know if it. I couldn't tell you if it feels clunky or quite smooth and intuitive.
I played a similar bit of that system. I played Wothrop Third, which Fantasy Flight put out, and it had a similar dice pool mechanic.
I think this was well before any of them.
Yeah, and both these systems are sort of precursor to their current Genesis system, or, well, not anymore their current Genesis system, I guess, Edge Entertainment's Genesis system.
Yeah.
Which all the Genesis games use a weird dice pool thing of weird dice. And the problem I found with the Wothrop one, it might be better implemented in Star Wars, was that there was a lot of rolling the dice and then staring at them for a bit and then figuring out what you wanted to do with that result.
This is why I'm caveating it with I've only played it on Roll20, so it works all of that out for me. So.
Yeah, that'd be pretty handy, because a lot of time you're staring at it going like, so a bit got 2 bad and I got 1 good, so I did it a bit bad, so what does that mean? And then I have to think about it narratively as to what that means and then say a thing. as opposed to just rolling a number and going, okay, this happened.
I will say this with like any with it being a Star Wars system, just the setting alone buys it a lot of good favor.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's fair.
On the note of interesting dice, I am not looking forward to all of the prototypes next year that have been playtested exclusively with automated tabletop simulator systems that mean there's drastic amounts more upkeep that the designer has not actually put into a physical copy. Like, for example, shuffle your deck
That's a very
6
good
times
point,
every turn.
I saw someone mentioning this on Twitter recently, going like, yeah, if you're going to bring your game to a publisher next year, make sure you haven't gone insane and like made like a game with like D25s or something ridiculous that are just never going to be printed or produced.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Iain, I cut you off with the predictions. That's a fantastic one.
Yeah.
I would can I very quickly, I think most of the RPGs I've been playing this year, because I'm thinking again a lot more, all actually fall into the miscellaneous category, I believe.
Oh wow.
I think the ones I played a very short part of a campaign of Paranoia, which was the Mongoose Publishing, I believe, which was described to me years ago as a combination of 1984, Brave New World, and the Marx Brothers. And I only played 2 games of it, but we all spent half the game just trying to kill each other.
I'm in.
You know,
Yep.
it's
That's enough.
That was odd, and you know the rules. Like I wasn't allowed to see the rules. Apparently, players are not allowed to see the rules because the game is kind of meant to be, again, that satire, that pastiche of dystopia, and a friend computer is watching you. So if the GM thinks you might start to be understanding how the rules are working, let's say you don't do that. I've also been playing Vampire: The Requiem, which I actually. This sounds like I'm damning myself with faint praise. I've actually been really enjoying. I think I've had bad experiences with the storyteller system previously, but I'm kind of feeling a bit better about it. Really enjoying that. And I've been playing some Wifrip Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition.
Nice.
So I've been having a lot of fun. And I've also been playing Dark Heresy 2nd edition. Getting my Warhammer in.
Yeah, I really, really want to run the first Aegon hack, which is called Chamber, and is basically based on the X-Files and the Control computer game.
Amazing.
Where you're all agents hunting down weird items that have been possessed by the alien signal.
I did send you one recently, I think, Iain, that was called Hellhound on My Trail, where you're all blues musicians in Dust Bowl era America.
Actually, talking about that, that's one of my predictions for 2021. I think itch is going to be a massive thing next year. It's become a bit of a thing this year for indie RPGs, and I think it's going to be much, much more of a thing. I think it's going to come to rival Drive-Thru-RPG as the place to go for sort of indie RPG projects.
100%.
Because I think there's been a bit of a backlash against Drive-Thru-RPG this year, and DM's Guild a little bit, and it seems to be the place that indie creators are going to do cool things. Like I played a game called Have I Been Good, which is a role-playing game you play with your dog.
Oh, yeah.
Which I put up on the site. I played that during lockdown with my dog Gypsy. It was more of a writing exercise than an RPG, I'd say, but it's still interesting that it's there at all.
That sounds like the most wholesome thing I've ever heard.
It's wholesome and it's really sad as well.
Yeah.
I think it may be sad because what happened, but if you want, Iain wrote up about it, but he wrote letters to his dog, and his dog wrote letters back, and
yeah, it's definitely a writing exercise, but it was a good one, and there's lots of interesting stuff on there. One thing I would urge you to do is if you are buying anything off itch, a lot of the stuff's free there, or pay what you want, and if you are getting anything off itch, one of the things that really, really helps out these creators, much as with a lot of these curated sort of online sellers like Steam and Drive-Thru-RPG, leave a review if you like the thing. That really, really helps people get noticed. I went back and left a review for Have I Been Good to help that creator out, and it is absolutely worth doing if there's stuff you like on there. But yeah, that's my prediction for 2021. I think itch is going to be a huge, huge thing, much, much bigger than it has been this year.
Yeah.
I'd like to add a little personal moment as well for myself, which was just after the lockdown started. I was contacted by Oliver from Tabletop Games blog, very lovely, and asked me to join in some streaming. that they were doing. Initially, I was sitting in on a game of Twilight Struggle because I happened to mention in a Discord that I kind of knew the rules, and apparently that was enough.
I haven't met a person who has like an encyclopedic understanding of those rules. I think everyone kind of knows the rules for Twilight.
Yeah, my story with Twilight Struggle is my favorite story about it is how I learned to play it, which was it was me and 2 friends, and we spent 3 days learning to play it. So the first day was me and 1 friend. We played for 3 hours, got rules wrong. Next day we came back. It was me and the other friend. We played for 3 hours. We played half a game, got rules wrong. Missed out a day. Then on the 4th day, all 3 of us came back. Finally understood the rules and played 2 games in the amount of time it took us to run like half a game previously.
And then the 5th day you rested.
And then we rested. But yeah, and then it kind of went from there. So I've been doing, I've been playing some games obviously with the Ians, but I've been, playing some games with more people that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I've now met online, which has been really nice, and I've never actually done very much online gaming per se. So this year has been quite an eye-opener for me. I've actually been playing a lot of Oath this year. I think it might be the game I've played most.
Yeah, wow. we have thoughts on Oath. I think we'll keep those thoughts on Oath under the bushel for just now.
No, I know, but I've played 4 games, and that sounds like you've only played 4 games this year, and that's the most you've played. Yeah. It's been a difficult year. Cut me some slack.
Yeah, it's been a difficult year for reviews. I've still got a stack of games to get through for reviews that I just haven't managed.
This time last year, I'd just been, I think, about a month previously, I'd been round at Ben's house, and you'd be there, Josh, and we played some Roots, didn't we? Yep. And then I think we played it again at Glasgow Games Festival, and I was like, right, 2020, man, we're going to play some Root. I've got Dune, we're going to play some Dune.
I mean, we had great plans to meet up once a month to play games amongst the Giant Brain team, and that started
such
well.
A great first couple of months. They were great.
Yeah, it was great. It was so good.
Super games.
But we'll get back. We will get back to it. I think we should probably wrap this up, though, because we're past an hour. Josh, where can people find yourself and the Unlucky Frog online if they want to go looking for you?
Yes, you can find our podcast on all the usual places that you can listen to your podcast. Just search for Unlucky Frog Gaming. There isn't any other search result when you put those words in. And nice. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter, and I'll send links over for Ian to post those below as well.
Yeah, we'll put all those in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh. It's been much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Always good to get a different perspective from the team on these kind of things. And thank you all very much for listening. As usual, if you like what you've listened to, then the best way to help us out is to share the podcast and drop us a review and rating on iTunes. And you can follow us on all the usual places as well: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Our website is thegiantbrain.co.uk. And you can email us about any of your thoughts, any of your predictions for 2021. If you would like to send those in, we may feature those on a cast early next year. That is giantbrainuk@gmail.com. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good Christmas, and we wish you a happy new year, and hopefully we'll all see each other in the flesh in the not too distant future. Good night.
Goodbye.
Bye.